This is the Think Podcast for entrepreneurs, business owners, and real estate professionals. Insight, real talk, systems that scale. Think about it.
Congratulations, you made it. Hey, listen, I know it can be frustrating. I know this business can be frustrating, but the good news is you made it here. And over the next 3 days, we're going to completely change the way that you look at things, but also put it all together. I know that many of you are coming out of an immersion where you study 2-3 days in a class, drinking water from a fire hose, as I always say, right? But now we're going to make that all make sense. We're going to put it together so that you're able to do the thing. I'm telling you, you're going to learn how to market effectively and get real leads that turn into real deals. You're going to be able to talk to your lenders directly by assembling everything and preparing it so that it now becomes an actual loan that gets funded so that you make money. We're going to go over how you talk to subcontractors and parties of thirds with appraisers and title officers. Look, I know it's a lot, but we're going to make it make sense. We're going to hold your hand through it. I promise I will not let you fail. Congratulations. I cannot wait to see you. And at the end of the 3 days, maybe not for all of you, but for some of you, there's going to be another step that you might choose to take. So go into this with an open mind. We're going to help you. It's going to make sense. I promise. It's going to be great. I'll see you there. Well, welcome to another exciting edition of the Think Podcast. We are so happy today because I'm really excited about this one for the fact that we're going to get a different type of an opinion and a real life look down into a pivot from somebody who's been massively successful in one career, is now a business owner of a very successful, kind of a cottage industry deal in New Jersey, but then is also adding private money brokering, real estate investing, and all that to his current repertoire and going down that road. And so he is a Think affiliate and really kind of kicked off and is doing stuff already and being successful. But today we're going to hear what that looks like. So maybe some of you that are out there in the audience are listening to this saying, okay, so I'm going to go from one thing into this, not knowing a whole lot about private money brokering and what the reality of that kind of looks like. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Brian Caputo, who we'll get into his bio here in a minute, but a guy that I spent the last couple of days with down here in Florida, going over the ins and outs and the nooks and crannies of really kind of starting this business. And I want you to hear from him what that transition is like and what his goals are. So Brian, tell the audience a little bit about you and your history, and you're so successful in other businesses over your career, and your desire to jump into this with the rest of us. So take it away, Brian.
Sure, Scott. So yeah, throughout my whole career, I've been in basically business operations for about 15 years now. I was in a corporate job, doing venue management for about 12 years. And then after that, transitioned actually over to commercial real estate for a couple years in the flexible office space industry. And then, after that, I went into facility management for, 2 years. And then I was like, you know what, I want to kind of take a stab at some entrepreneurship. And then I purchased a business in my town called Town Line Trophy and Design. We, deal with trophies, awards, personalized gifts and promotional items. And, I kind of started learning about this, whole private money brokering thing. And I was like, oh, how could I apply, what I was doing in my business stuff over 15 plus years? And, how could I apply it to that given, dealing with customers and customer service? And, it really, piqued my interest of, what that world kind of entails.
Yeah. And so you jumped in with both feet, right? Some people kind of think that they're going to do it maybe as a side hustle, which is okay too. I mean, it's exponentially harder to do it when you're kind of doing it part-time, but I can tell you folks, he is driven, educated, he's serious because I spent 2 days with him, right? And got to know him fairly well, and he's not playing around. And so give the listeners, I think people have preconceived notions, right, about what this business is. And so give them two things, actually. It's a two-part question. One, what your expectations or thought of the industry were going into it. And now that you've jumped with both feet into it, what you're seeing is maybe a different thing on the back end of the curtain.
Yeah, that's a great question, because when I first, learned about it, I was like, oh, okay, so there's private money brokering, you're working with lenders and trying to connect the lenders with the borrowers. And And I felt like that was a, pretty unique thing. But then as you and I were discussing more and kind of going through it, I was like, you know what, there's a deeper level to all this. There's a customer service relationship side of this that I don't think people realize. And it's so much more than just trying to go find your deal points, or whatever your landscape of whatever real estate deal you're working on, just trying to find all the information online and click this, click that. But there's a deeper level of that, of getting people to understand of how their numbers are working, and what do they actually need for their actual deal and stuff, and carrying that relationship, looking out for those people, from a customer service standpoint. And I think throughout my whole career I've kind of understood that customer service and relationships side that is really valuable in this industry.
Yeah. I mean, would you say though, because I mean, obviously at some point you had staffs of hundreds of people, right? And you were, in your facilities, there'd be 100,000 people, right? And so that's a success point in dealing with all those personalities. And one of the things that we talked about, and he brought up a great point, and I can't stop thinking about it, is really being the master of dealing with all types of different personalities, because your businesses can be all this different stuff. And he's monsterly successful with Townline in the trophy and in apparel and setting up that game too. But what would be one piece of advice that you would give to kind of a newer person thinking about getting into this, about some of the comments that you made about dealing with personalities and really going along your customer service mantra of really giving the best in class service, no matter what business you're doing, whether you're doing Townline or you're private money brokering or whatever you do?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you kind of got to take a step back and kind of look at the whole landscape of, one, who is that person? What are they doing? And, what are they trying to achieve? And I think when you take that step back and kind of, really listen to what they're looking for and what they're trying to, get out of something, or, what they're trying to solve. I think that's bigger than actually just kind of jumping in and just like, oh, here's my services, here's what I'm offering. You really got to understand the landscape and picture of what they're looking for, so you can relate better to them, and then start filling those specific boxes that actually help them out. It doesn't matter what kind of journey they're on, whether they're doing this or it's just a standard assistance with some kind of issue that they might be having. So it's really understanding the full landscape of what they're doing and how they're trying to get to a specific solution or actual location.
Sure. I mean, and I want you guys to pick up on something that he said, is that, understand the landscape. To me, when I hear him say that, because I know how smart he is and he's methodical in what he does, and detailed, is understanding where they're coming from and setting the expectations to that, because we all know that if you set the wrong expectations, it's always going to be a problem in the end. It might ease some of the pain in the front end, but then you're going to have to deal with it at the end. So with running two successful businesses, and this is another point that I want you to talk to, because you better than anybody else can really address, and they're vastly different. The customer service aspect of it is that, and everything that you do, and the quality of the service, because you have a hard deliverable on one side, where if the trophies are wrong or it's misspelled on the engraving or the embroidery or whatever it is, right, they're going to know immediately. And so that's an immediate fix or a problem and a fire you have to put out. But this is a little bit different, because somebody puts in an order for what you're doing on the one business, then the order goes through, the product gets delivered, you deliver that product, everybody's satisfied, it's great, and then they reorder. This is a longer pathway and a lot more communication. So how do you, again, a two-part question, deal with a bifurcation of your approach to success and communication, and understanding the needs and setting the expectations on one business, so that you've got two successful businesses that are different but the same, on that? I know that's a broad brush and that's a big question, but what is your approach as a business owner, an entrepreneur, to two businesses at the same time?
Yeah, it is a, kind of a, broad question there, but I think it's actually in more simplistic terms. It comes down to time management and systems and processes. If you don't have those in place, you're going to struggle with both. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to understand of, okay, what is your intake, how you're taking the intake from there to potential opportunity, and then, converting that as well. So it all comes down to those three key elements. And if you don't have those properly, you won't be successful. It doesn't even matter what kind of business you're running. You have to understand of how you're bringing everything in and then actually
Sure.
execute on that.
Well, and I couldn't agree with you more, because if you don't have a system and a process, it's just kind of every single deal is like a fire drill.
Yep.
Right. And so if you don't set the expectations and have a system to be able to pull that off, or a process that's repeatable that you can teach to other people, it's, you're going to be, I'll say it, you're going to get your ass kicked on every deal, no matter what it is, whether you're selling the trophies and all that stuff, or doing the private money brokering. What are some of the systems, if you could give, a piece of advice, excuse me, to the people that are coming in saying, okay, well, what systems, what processes is he doing? Because he's been so successful every other time. How is he bringing that into this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and it actually can really relate to a lot of different businesses, especially service-based industries. You got to have a good CRM system. And I think it's key detail for that. You got to understand where your customers are coming in, who you're dealing with, what kind of relationships that you have with them, and then how is that translating to the executed product. It doesn't matter what the product is itself. It's like, how are you taking it from one system to the next to actually execute that and fulfill that specific product or service that you have or you're offering to your clientele. So I think that's the key thing, and that's probably the biggest system. You got to have two systems that are actually talking to each other at the same time, because if they're not, you could have something in one system, and if it doesn't communicate properly to the next one, you have part of your system, but then there's a breakdown in that communication to the next one where you could actually still fumble at the same time. So you got to make sure that everything is flowing and everything's working together.
Yeah, because you always talk about how every business you approach, and this is something I got out of our conversations that I thought was just great, was you the first thing you always look to eliminate is a single point of failure, right? Because you talk about that if you have a single point of failure, then everything comes down to a roadblock. Because you having to manage a Justin Bieber, like literally, folks, concert. He had a whole building full of people watching Bieber and all these other superstars. It was never a singular point of failure. And so you take that to the big and the small. Talk about your approach to that, because you look at it from marketing that way, because there's nobody that's going to know how to market better than you, right? Because of the levels that you played on. But how you eliminate a single point of failure. Dive a little bit deeper into that, because you talked about where the systems are talking to each other. So talk about that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I would say that if you're coming to a situation where you're at maybe a roadblock or that single point of failure that you're talking about, my key thing is, like, if I don't have a solution right then and there, I'm going to go try to find that solution and exhaust all options possible.
Sure, right.
So it really all depends on what it is. Every scenario is different, but transparency is key in a lot of this stuff. You got to make sure that you're not kind of just like beating around, with stuff when you're working with clients or customers. You got to be transparent, open and front. Like, if you're not sure of something or you need to go check on something, just be open and honest with them up front and say, hey, I'm pretty sure we could do something like this, but let me check on this. Or, hey, I'm not sure, let me go check and then see, what solution I can come up with to help you, with, what your needs are. So I think that's the biggest thing. And, I was going to touch on like a damage control thing as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
if that,
please do. No, do it. Do it.
Yeah, I don't know if
Sure,
that's
it'll help
necessarily
somebody.
like a big thing, but like, obviously it doesn't matter what business you have. You're always going to have roadblocks. You're going to have something that pops up.
Yep.
You got to jump in and figure out, okay, this came up as X. How do I get the YZ, basically? You got to, not everything is going to be perfect. If you're going into a business and think things are going to be perfect, entrepreneurship is probably not going to be for you. You got to figure out those elements and how to work around those to find that collective solution to be successful.
That's like we always say around here, being an entrepreneur is like jumping off the cliff and then building the plane on the way down, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
it's all of it. It's joy, panic. It's 100 different things. And so you have to be wired a little bit differently to kind of cut it like this. On the private money brokering side, and you're out there, you're starting to work, series of leads now. You're getting everything together. You're getting onto your systems, as you call it. What is something that you see in the industry right now that is a common misconception as people are going to go out there when they're finding deals? Because we get a lot of calls on that all the time. They're like, well, how do we get the deals and where do we go and what's the next step? Give a piece of advice that you've found from a lead following perspective, being new to this. But like, because if I got into town line, right, and I was getting into the trophy space, I get it, right? You do trophies and engagements or the Super Bowl rings that everybody wears or the belts or the T-shirts and all this stuff. But I wouldn't know how to go get a lead to get a trophy contract, right? So talk a little bit about your adventures in that and what that is looking like for you currently.
Yeah, I would say, when I first, found out about this world, started learning it and, so forth, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go try to start finding people and whatnot. But I didn't have proper systems and stuff in place to really go do all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing is like, the biggest misconception that I've noticed is like, everyone is trying to, try to find certain things of like, okay, how do I get to, how do I, get lower interest rate here or, lower points here or higher this, higher that, or, how do I find the best deal? But a lot of it's all coming down to the relationship that you're having with the person you're working with. And I will
Amen.
continuously go back to that. And I think that's the biggest misconception. Now, I agree. Convenience is the name of the game in so many different worlds. And the convenience that you can provide a person on a relationship basis is speed and accuracy. And giving them all information that they need. So I think that's the biggest thing. And I'm going to go back to the systems again. Like, you need to have those things in place so you can have that speed and accuracy. It's not easy just to kind of jump out there and kind of go about it. You need to have some kind of structure to actually work with this, but any business as a whole.
Yeah, and I think you bring up so many good points about the communication thing, because like we talked about, if you're not talking to people start to make up stories in their head.
Mm-hmm.
They do, right? Because it's a one-sided conversation. And so the realities of what's going on inside is their hamsters running on their wheel because they haven't heard from somebody is always slants to the negative.
Yep.
And folks, if I could tell you anything, if you're not communicating with people, they're not going to automatically divert to the best case scenario in their head. They're going to divert to the worst case scenario in their head. So you've got to put Humpty Dumpty back together again as you make a call if you haven't talked to somebody, because they're probably uneasy. There's a slight panic because we're talking about money. It's one thing when you're selling trophies and engraved pint glasses and stuff like that at a town line. It's another thing when you're talking about somebody's dreams of flipping a house and improving their life with their family, and because you're talking about money. Mm-hmm. Money panics people for a lot of different reasons, because this might be their first foray at flipping a house, because it's more difficult than it looks like on TV, right? And I don't know why the TV flipper shows don't ever talk about how the money works, because that's really what they should be talking about. But I think that there's a thing about communication there that you're holding on to. And I think if anybody's heard anything that he said today, over communication is never a bad thing, because it helps manage the expectation all the way through. And then it keeps them coming back to you. Like in your one business or all of your businesses, your goal has always been to obtain the client and then keep the client, right? It's been very rare that you would ever do a one-off and go, oh, that was it. I only wanted to work with that person once, and we're not going to work with them again, right? I mean, how many repeat clients do you guys have at Town Line? Because you bought an existing business very smartly. You got a smoking deal on a very reputable business in your town, and so you're doing very well with that. But I mean, I would have to imagine that you're aiming for training people on how to work with you so that they continue to work with you, and even if they're a first-time person. Wouldn't you say that that's a secret to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to touch on that, the biggest thing with, it all revolves around the same thing, any business.
Yeah.
Repeat business is where your business will thrive. The new business is great because that brings in more for repeatable business, but keeping your clientele happy and, taking care of their needs for them to continuously come back is super important. And honestly, for Townline as a whole, we're probably about 85% repeat business, which is pretty high for,
awesome.
business of this kind of industry. 15% is, new business, but obviously we want to keep everyone happy. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is, but that 85% is, a big part of, the business as a whole.
Yeah. And I think, wrapping this up today on this, I want to ask you, final question I would have for you today, because you're doing so well, right? Do you see, because we get questions like this, not always, but from time to time, we get questions on people talking about either going micro, staying micro, or going macro, meaning in the private money space, that means going out to other geo areas, stuff like this. So expanding, because you're well dug into southern New Jersey, kind of those areas over there in Philadelphia. And I know you've got plans to go maybe bigger one day, but talk a little bit about your philosophy going forward of where you're going to focus your business, and if you're going to go macro, or if you're going to be known as the guy, kind of like you are with the Townline business, of the guy in your area. Talk about your philosophy on that a little bit.
Yeah, my big thing is I think you got to kind of, as you're building a business, or, private money, or, the retail, what I'm doing, I think it's best to start small and start your radius outward from that way. Because you gotta build a rapport with not with just your customers, but also yourself, but also as you're trying to fine tune your processes and procedures, learning as you go along. Like, if you start too big too fast, that's usually where you can fall. But if you start small and start branching out, that's going to give you better success than trying to reach out in different areas, right away. Plus, it gives you reputation at the same time. So if you're starting to build that reputation up and people are giving feedback, I mean, that helps you build out stronger and bigger, because you have that backbone to go off of because of, previous success with your micro. Going micro to macro is usually the best way to go, but it all depends on industry, obviously, but it's usually better to go that way and then, kind of branch out.
Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it. Now, I want to tell our listeners too, with Brian being in the Think affiliate, we're going to be actually following his growth and his scope. I'm excited to do that and bring that as a series to you guys, because for a lot of different reasons. But I think that Brian has the ability, and he's also open. He's totally, like, he talks about communication, how important that is. He's very open with his trials and errors. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of errors with you, if I'm honest, but the trials and challenges that he's going to go to be able to talk about what he's going through as he's building his PMB, and kind of passing that along to you guys. So, Brian, we look forward to so many episodes of this series to come with you, and thank you for this first one and what you're going through to kick all this off. I could not be more excited for you, because I know you're going to be a success. So thank you so much.
Scott, really appreciate the time on this. I had a lot of fun with it too.
For sure, man. And we'll be another couple weeks, and you guys will hear from Brian again, and he'll give you an update on how it's going. And I know he's super busy with Townline too. So congrats on success on both ends. So we appreciate it, man. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, brother. Bye.